Why would we ever want a government to begin with? The American Declaration of Independence says that governments are needed for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is, they're for our welfare, especially for the most rudimentary element of our welfare, our security. But can we prove it? The most famous proof is with an experiment that we call the state of nature. This is our big idea for week 2. We said last week that philosophy is not a science. So that means it doesn't do experiments, right? Not quite right. It doesn't do empirical experiments, but it does do thought experiments. Scientists often experiment by comparing two groups of people. The control group, made up of people like you and me, and the experimental group, made up of people like you and me, except for a single change. Say everybody walks 5 miles every day for a year. You compare the experimental group with the control group, you record the consequences of that single change. Except it usually isn't that easy, since it may not occur to us until later that walking a lot might not be the only change that matters. What about the effect of extra exposure to the sun on vitamin D production? What about the effect of the social experience on mental health? And what about the people who wear bad shoes and ruin their feet? Thought experiments are like that. In this week's case, we take ordinary people like you and me, and we imagine a change. That we have no government whatsoever, no courts, no laws, not even informal customs that we are socially pressured to follow. Thomas Hobbes called this the state of nature, but he could have called it the condition of being in the wild. In his imaginary case, he believes that we would want to fix things fast. We wouldn't be personally safe, our families, homes, and food would also be in danger. We would need not only to make laws, but to enforce them and to interpret them. We would need legislators, police, and judges. We'd need government, and only then could we trust each other. But John Locke disagreed with Hobbes. Sure, if there weren't enough necessities to go around, we would be dangerous to each other. But our planet abounds in food and supplies. So when we imagine abundance in the state of nature, we can see that the big problem is not actually our security, it's our ambition. We all want to achieve different things in our lives, but we can't unless there's social coordination. I may want to sell produce or stock shares, but I need a reliable marketplace where buyers and sellers can come together. You may want to drive a car for hire, but you need a paved road with rules about which side to drive on. So we'd still need legislators and police and judges, but less so for security and more so for other aspects of our welfare. But then Jean-Jacques Rousseau came along and argued that there was another deeper problem. What if the thing that makes us mistrustful, as in the case of Hobbes, and that makes us want to achieve things, as in the case of Locke, is society itself? Once you remove the trappings of society and put everybody back into the state of nature, maybe we would be naturally kind to one another and be content with what we have. This turns the thought experiment upside down. It was supposed to show why we would want a government, but maybe it shows why we would not want a government, why we'd be better off without the unnatural social hierarchies that generate, at worst, abuses of power, and at best, competition and envy. If Rousseau is right, that gives us two choices. Get rid of all social hierarchy and return to the state of nature. This choice is called anarchism, but in a good way. Alternatively, and this was Rousseau's choice, accept the practical impossibility of eliminating government and simply reform it so that the government can remake us into the altruistic beings that we naturally are. The thought experiment then, depending upon how we set it up, could yield at least 3 different answers to the question of why have a government. For Hobbes, it's protection. For Locke, it's achievement. For Rousseau, it's improvement. That is to say, we're still awaiting conclusive results. It is, after all, only 4 centuries since Hobbes got the experiment going, so it's still young in philosophy years. But it does point towards some broad conclusions. Can you trust everyone to leave you and your loved ones alone? If no, then some sort of government is necessary for security. Do you and I have very different things that we want to achieve with our lives, but things that we both can be humanly proud of? If yes, then some sort of government can provide a framework for achieving them, as long as it lets us still be different. In short, the state of nature thought experiment at least suggests that if it just doesn't screw it up, a government can improve our chances of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, our chances of security and welfare. And in coming weeks, we will dig deeper into what that means. And that's the big idea for week 2.